your socks! Hey!
The Lost Art with Andrew Cox podcast, now streaming on all major podcast platforms. A Till Valhalla Project ambassador. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast that's given a voice to our veterans. The Lost Art with Andrew Cox. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast, that podcast giving a voice to our veterans. I'm your host, Andrew Cox, and today we're having a fireside chat with S.O.S podcast host, Theresa Carpenter. But before we get into the episode, if you're enjoying the podcast, go to the website. That's thelostart.podbean.com. Go check it out. See what we're all about. If there's any way you can help support us in getting our veteran voices out for all to hear, please do so. Also, a big shout out to the Till Valhalla Project. If you don't know anything about that great organization, go to their website. That's tillvalhallaproject.com. And if you're a Marine out there and you're missing that brotherhood, that sisterhood, and you need to get back to the Marine Corps roots, well, there is an organization out there for you. It's called the Marine Corps League. So there is one close to you in over 1,150 cities across the country. So please, please, please go join the Marine Corps League. Help support them. Get their numbers up, and let's do some good stuff and be part of that brotherhood and sisterhood again. Same team, new mission. The Marine Corps League. A legacy of valor. Once a Marine, always a Marine, is familiar to us all. It is that feeling you get when you see a Marine Corps sticker on a car or home proudly displaying the Marine Corps flag. We know we can knock on the door and that Marine will be there for us. Despite our many years of service to different causes, we all have that common bond. We have all earned the privilege to wear the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. The Marine Corps League is the only congressionally chartered Marine Corps Veteran Service organization with detachments in 1,150 communities across the U.S. Please take a few minutes to check it out. Visit today at mcleague.org or email tribe@mcleague.org. All right, with that, I've got our special guest here. Theresa, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Andrew? Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm excited, fellow podcast host, and I think it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting started and talking to you a little bit about service to our country and service above self and service with others.
That's right. Absolutely. And you're still active duty, but you have this podcast, which is really, really cool. I do have questions about that later, but I want you to kind of tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. I'm born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. That's where I enlisted. I enlisted when I was 19 years old. I went to Catholic schools most of my life. Was raised in a very much a college town. Go Buckeyes. There are much to do there. It's kind of like the national religion in there. I mean, I think I even changed the name to the college. It's now the Ohio State University instead of just Ohio State. So it is everywhere in my hometown. But yeah, I went to the Catholic schools growing up. My mom and dad both in the home, and then after high school, well, around high school time, I was getting in some arguments with my mother, and decided that it was best that we separate. So we put me up in a home for some college roommates that were all going to OSU for me to live with, and from there I worked a series of jobs and saw that everybody was sort of getting their life together and going off to school and doing things. And I was partying and working tons of jobs and kind of felt a little bit aimless, like my life wasn't going anywhere. And it was suggested to me by a couple people that I might want to enlist in the military. And that got me down a path of seeing a recruiter. And the next thing you know, April 14th, 1996, I raised my right hand.
Very nice. Very nice. And now, what did you originally go into the Navy for?
I went in as a aviation air crewman. Sorry. So
air crewman.
When I joined, it was air crew. And then once you got through air crew school, you would pick your Navy rating. And at the time, I didn't know what Navy rating to pick. And I think I wanted AO. That was my first aviation ordnanceman, because I was like, oh, you get to work with bombs. This is going to be so cool. War fighting. I've always been very attracted to the tactical end or the pointy end of the spear, so to speak.
Right.
But then I think the decision to be an electrician was based on the fact that I thought about what I would actually be able to do once I'm out of the military. So
Mm.
I was like, well, I don't think there's a real, at least I didn't know at the time, the real demand for people to fix aircraft or to load aircraft bombs
Yeah.
onto airplanes in the civilian sector. But I think I could fix some wires as an electrician. And
Yeah.
so that's what I did. Now, I had no interest in being a tinkerer. I was not a welder or a builder or any of those things growing up, but I just needed a job. And I saw it as a path to better myself and to serve my country and to get my life on track. So that's what I did.
Yeah, and it obviously worked, right? I mean, it's done well for you. So you're
It,
you're out there doing your thing. Now, when did you actually go officer?
So I didn't get my officer package put in until I'd been at VS 35, Sea Control Squadron 35, Blue Wolves, until I was there for about 2.5, 3 years. And it took a
Okay.
lot of coaxing and mentoring for me to even
Mm,
think that that was something I could do. I wasn't like one of
right.
those people that thought, "Oh gosh, I'm officer material." I can remember, gosh, I'll never forget this day. I'm in my aircraft hangar and I'm sitting on the top of my airplane, and I've got I forget what these kind of wrenches were, but one of those like one of the panels. We called them panel parties where we would take off all the panels and do
Oh,
corrosion
right.
control inside. And I remember seeing like the NFO, the naval flight officer, and the pilots walking out to the aircraft.
Yeah.
And I remember I was sitting there with I even forget what this, I could picture the wrench in my head, but I just don't remember the name of it. And I remember looking at them going, why do they get to just walk around in their flight suits and this is their life? And I'm just sitting up here on the top of this airplane. I always kind of had that attitude like, why do they get to do it and I don't? Which, of
Yeah,
course,
yeah.
they worked for whatever they had. And, I'm
Hmm.
wiser now. And I was just a kid back then. But I think that instilled in me, like, oh, well, I don't think I'm good enough to be an officer. And then after a series of years of being there, I thought, well, maybe just put this package in and see what happens. And so
Right.
that's what I did. And I got selected my first time up and went seaman to admiral. That was my commissioning source. And from that point, I thought I wanted to go nurse corps. They had to pick like what
Okay.
you wanted to do as an officer. And I was like, oh, maybe
Right.
I'll be a nurse. I want to be in the helping profession. I thought when I was a little girl, I would be a social worker.
Hmm.
And they didn't select me for that. They selected me for the core option, which meant I had to go unrestricted line. So I could have gone aviation, surface,
Oh,
or
wow.
yeah. So I had no choice. I think aviation and surface were the only two options because back then subsurface was not an option. So
Hmm.
I chose surface because I didn't want to go back and be an NFO or a pilot. I knew that life and I wanted something different.
Right.
And so I joined the surface community, but very quickly upon this decision, I learned that there were PAOs. So I
Yeah.
joined public affairs with the intent of laterally transferring one day to public affairs.
Oh, okay. Very nice. Wow. So oh man, what did you call it? It's seaman to admiral. Is
Yes.
that what exactly is that? Is
So
that
that
like
is
sorry,
a
go ahead.
commission. Oh, it's an enlisted commissioning program. So what it
Hmm.
is it pays you all your pay and your allowances while you're going to school. So I went to school as an E5 and I was paid as an E5 the entire time I was in school. In fact, I made E6 while I was still in the program. And then
Okay.
once I graduated as an ensign.
Got it. So it's the same thing for like the Marine Corps as the enlisted commissioning program, the ECP.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. Yeah. I just never heard it seaman to admiral. I've never heard that before.
Yep,
As
they still have it. I think it's
yeah.
a lot more different now. Like it's mostly geared towards engineering fields. In fact, when I went, they would try to encourage you to pick an engineering degree, but I
Oh,
knew
really?
oh yeah, like science and math or something along those lines. And I knew that those were my weak spots. And so
Hmm.
I pursued a degree in communications. But by the time I attended college, I knew there were public affairs officers in the Navy. And so I started to build my resume and everything that I was doing based on this intent that I was going to go into the community. So everything from volunteering with a marketing
Oh,
firm.
wow.
I mean, the marketing office at a newspaper to
Hmm.
studying the Navy public affairs community. I did a whole summer internship where I decided to go into the history. I've always been sort of a very curious person, so I wanted to see what
Yeah.
the history of the Navy public affairs community was and how we got started as the War Department and how we got started in messaging and things like that
Right.
with the military. So, and my father was a voiceover artist and a broadcaster himself. So
Oh, wow.
I knew that this was something that interested me. I just didn't know that it was something I was going to do professionally for the Navy.
Right. Yeah. Now, what was that? What is it like now doing the job of public affairs? I mean, I've talked to several different public affairs officers in the Marine Corps, and sometimes it's pretty good, and other times not so much, because you got to deal with some incredibly negative things at times.
Yes, you do. And the more senior you get, I would argue the harder and the more
Yeah.
challenging the assignments come. When you're more junior, you're doing the more of the tactical tasks of public affairs, like
Right.
put together this read ahead, uh, do,
Hmm.
attend with your boss prepping the admiral to go on camera, or you're
Right.
managing the social media pages. But when you get to, I'd say the 05, 06 level, you're really in a spot where you are the face of that command and you're the
Hmm.
spokesperson for that command, and everybody wants a piece of you. And
Oh,
everybody,
yeah.
especially if you're in a command that has multiple flag officers who all think that
Hmm.
you're their personal PAO.
Oh,
Uh,
no.
yeah. So there's definitely a challenge there with
Yeah.
deciding with your limited resources and manning and staff, what are the narratives that you're going to focus on and why,
Hmm.
and how you're going to drive those narratives home. And so it has definitely gotten more challenging as the years have gone by. But
Right.
ultimately, I'm grateful for the public affairs community. It's given me so many amazing assignments. I got assigned to an aircraft carrier. I've been assigned to an
Nice.
amphibious assault ship. I've done joint tours. I've worked in NATO. I've done so many incredible
Wow.
experiences. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. You get
Yeah,
to go to some cool places then.
I
Uh,
did.
so now when you're doing the like spokesperson for the admiral or the command, uh, it I man, I couldn't do it. I couldn't get out there and talk about, somebody gets in trouble and now you got to talk about it and explain, and you
Sure.
got to, there's only certain things you can say, right?
Yep.
You got to navigate that whole thing. I can't imagine that's easy.
It's not. It's absolutely not. And especially because the media is always going to want to know more than what you're able to say. And you're at the
Right.
mercy of your chain of command about what you can and can't say. And it's not your fault as a spokesperson that you are being driven to put out a certain narrative.
Right.
Regardless of what you personally feel about that narrative, that is the narrative of your command. So
Hmm.
it's definitely a challenge. I think a lot of PAOs at my pay grade kind of got down a road where they sort of decide if they can continue to do this job or if they want to branch out and do something else. And so I'm sort of on that branch out and do something else. Hence, that's why I have the podcast. And I'm
Right.
able to have a lot more freedom with what I do on the podcast than anything that I could do officially. But when I'm officially working for a particular command, I'm all in on that
Hmm.
command and their messages and what it is that they are saying about a particular issue, because that's my job. And my
Yeah,
ethics
absolutely.
drive me to do that. But it is definitely very challenging. I mean, you have to navigate a really tough road, and we have some very honest professionals that do their best and try to navigate the roads in front of them. It is definitely hard.
Yeah. The when you're working with, like we mentioned before we started, I was in the band and you work pretty close with the bands from time to time. So not only working with just the bands, but all the other small units like that that are across, like what is the dynamic from your point of view? And I've seen it from my point of view, but never from the public affairs point of view, working with those organizations.
You mean like the lower level echelon commands?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that can be pretty difficult. I mean, the best experience that I can speak to is when I was at NATO and
Mm,
we had different nations, public affairs people, and none of them on the ships they don't have the manning or the staffing to send professionally trained public affairs officers, but they do a great
Right.
job. They find somebody on their ship who can do the job to the best of their ability. And
Hmm.
we are responsible for really training them up and
Oh, wow.
starting to work with them on the type of content that we need. I mean, they can usually identify somebody on their ship that knows how to take good pictures. That's usually not too hard. And especially with cell phones these days, there's a lot of things that people can do to collect content just from their phones. And so, I
Right.
mean, I've run entire exercises from a cell phone, collecting
No
content.
kidding.
Oh, yeah. Collecting content on the phone, doing all the reels on the phone, doing all the editing on the phone. I mean, I do my podcast mostly from my phone. The only time I
Yeah.
ever use
Yeah.
all this stuff is when I'm in front of you right now. But
Yeah.
day to day, I mean, everything that I want to do is right here. All my
Hmm.
reels, everything, my back and forth with my virtual assistant, everything is right here. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's like the future of our business. The more
Oh,
that
yeah.
we get our PAOs trained to just use things that are easy and that they can just go back and forth on. I mean, it's the only way that you're going to be able to succeed in such a rapidly changing information environment is to have that flexibility.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that, the devices are getting so good now, and sometimes the quality of the photos, the quality of, because you can do so many different things with it, and I think it's just as good, if in some cases better than some of the other very expensive equipment that's out there.
Oh, I know. I know. When I see my MCs carrying or lugging around this big camera equipment and they're using all this like government computers to try to push product back and forth, and I know that's what they're bound by the rules
Right.
to do, but it hopefully there'll be more people getting issued government cell phones and things like
Hmm.
that so that they can push those products more seamlessly through through chat apps and things like that because that's where it's at is I mean
Hmm.
especially when I have to collect content from partners and allies
Hmm.
you're going to be able to do so much more communication through a WhatsApp chat than ever
Oh yeah.
you could do in any other format. And so I think that what I hope anyway is with this new administration is that they really look at some of those ways in which we can communicate more seamlessly and break
Hmm.
down some of those barriers that I've seen in our community where it's not easy to push out a message because of all these layers of official firewalls and official government accounts that you can't use as well. So anyway, I'm going on a
Yeah.
tangent right there, but
No, 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 that's good.
I'm
That's
talking
good.
about my last job and some of the frustrations that I experienced uh, with that. Now, thankfully, they did provide me with a government cell phone, so that was helpful in that regard. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly a new world out there, and people like you and
Oh yeah.
I, as pod off duty, of course, podcasters. Are the future. And I
Hmm.
really encourage our community to get on board with engaging more in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be fantastic if they would start a podcast like for active duty, something I don't know. It'd be pretty cool. Maybe
It
each service
would.
have their own podcast and
I mean,
talk about different things.
I've put feelers out there. If they start a Department of Defense podcast, I'm all in. Or if they start a Navy podcast, I'm all in. I would
Yeah.
love nothing more than to be a part of something like that. Now, would I be a part of something like that? Probably not. I retire in 14 months. I've got my own show. Things are going pretty good, but I will
Yeah.
be happy if they start something up like that. And I do anticipate that they will. Seeing where things are going, and seeing the Sean Ryan show getting mentioned, how many times in
Hmm.
Senate testimony last week with Pete
Oh
Hegseth.
yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
that's the future. That is the future. So I see that happening, and it's just a matter of time before we start to build up all that infrastructure.
Absolutely. That was now you got to actually attend the confirmation hearing, correct?
I did.
So could you talk a little bit about that? Like, what was that like to be in the room? I got to watch it from home, and for me personally, this is just me. Uh, my blood pressure goes sky high when I listen to these things, and just because of I don't know, I can't trust any politicians. That's the way I
I
see it.
understand.
But I'm like,
Well,
oh my God, why ask such stupid questions and continue to hound?
I
And
know.
I can't
I
imagine being in
know.
the room.
I mean, honestly, it was one of those things where I wanted to barely go to the bathroom. Like I was planning, like if they would talk about, and this sounds really sad, but when they would talk about something like military readiness, and I know
Yeah,
that's like the most important thing that everyone, but that I just wanted to see like the character stuff and the
yeah.
and the stuff that where he really knows how to break down an argument and knows how to deconstruct what someone's saying. And it was
Hmm.
so impressive. I mean,
Oh yeah.
we've never had a trained communication professional
Hmm.
at the helm like that. And it was a master class, in my opinion, on
Oh yeah.
public relations. I learned so much this past week about putting together a proper press conference,
Hmm.
about how to combat misinformation or whatever. I hate that word, but how to combat when somebody is, yeah, because I realize it's kind of a weaponized word, but how to, when people take what you say out of context, they
Right.
don't give you a chance to explain the entire point that you're trying to make, and then they just talk over you. And that's
Yeah.
pretty much what a lot of people were doing during that hearing. The first
Hmm.
part of the hearing, the people got kicked out. That was a lot of fireworks, but they were people that were opposed to Gaza. They weren't like Antifa or people that really hate Pete Hegseth. I didn't get that
Yeah.
sense. They were people that had a particular cause and they made their statements and screamed what they wanted to scream. And then boom, the Capitol, I think it's Capital One Police, Capital One's Capitol
Yeah.
Security, they were just like, oh, on them. I mean, it was so cool. I mean, as I saw that,
Nice.
I was like, I have so much respect for those. In fact, I went up to one of them afterwards and thanked him for for their diligence. And then they stood there at the front of where the spectators were sitting and they just
Right.
stood there. And it was just so impressive. So
No
it was a
kidding.
4 hour long
And they stood
confirmation
there the whole
hearing.
time.
They would take breaks. I mean, people would just
Yeah.
come in and out and relieve each other. But I've never
Wow.
sat through 4 hours like that and felt completely enthralled in everything that was
Yeah.
being said. And it was nice because they had TVs on either side. So I was like in the fourth row back and I could
Hmm.
see, and I had my glasses on, so I could see everything that was being said. And then, of course, I'm sitting around all these other veterans and first responders and a gentleman that's on the 9/11 Commission. I mean,
Oh wow.
it was electrifying to be in that
Yeah.
room and to be around so many patriotic Americans all united for a common cause. I think the name that Bill Brown, he's the Navy SEAL that organized everything. He called it Operation Full Court Press. And
Nice.
yeah, and we lined up that morning at 4 in the morning outside the doors of the Senate, and we just sat there, standed out there in the cold,
Yeah.
and just bullshitted. I mean, talked with one another and learned
Yeah.
everyone's
You're good at,
stories.
you can say
Oh,
anything on here.
okay,
This is
okay,
good.
yeah, yeah. But it was so amazing. And then the same time, I mean, I get so excited talking about this. So the same
No, that's
time
good.
that we were in the Senate room, Bill took another group, completely separate group, by the way, which was probably like 40 or 50 people. And
Hmm.
he had them all carry American flags and they had a banner and all this stuff. And they went to like all these, like the Vietnam War Memorial. And I couldn't tell you all the
Oh,
other
right.
historical sites, but they went to each historical site. And then they had a speaker who spoke.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, like there's pictures all over the internet and videos of it. And then everything was just great. Like we started the week off with the press conference, and at the press conference there was somebody that even served with Pete, and then there were different people that spoke about why this cause was so important to them. And then I
Hmm.
spoke for 2 minutes off
Oh, no
duty,
kidding.
out of uniform. Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
unofficially.
yeah, yeah. Well,
um,
now what organization was it that you were up there with? What is it called?
I mean, I don't really, to be quite honest, I don't want to misrepresent the
Okay,
organizations that
that's
were
fine.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the only problem. There is a one organization in particular who organized it and did some things with it, but I don't want to say that it was
Yeah.
just them. If there's like three others that were also associated with them, I just know
Right.
Bill asked me to come do it, and
Very cool.
I was all for it. I was like, okay, I'll do it. So I did. And yeah, it was just an outstanding event, and I'm just proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was super cool. I don't know. I looked at some of the stuff. I was like, oh man, I'm all excited and everything. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed watching the Senate hearing. But I just can't believe it. Every time I watch them, it doesn't matter who they're interviewing, whether it's their Republican or Democratic side, it just
Sure.
gets crazy and it drives me insane.
Well, I
And
honestly think it's just like for the reels. Like it's only for the
oh yeah,
sound bites.
absolutely,
It's
absolutely,
not to actually debate the issues. I mean, they must debate the issues some other place and maybe through phone calls or through other meetings that we don't see. But when they
yeah,
have those like public hearings, I honestly feel that the only purpose of them is so that people can collect their 2 minute soundbite or their 1 minute or less, and they're already thinking about what's going to play on socials, like what
Yeah.
statements they're going to say on socials. And when they're making a statement, they're thinking to themselves, well, what can they say in 30 seconds or less or a minute or less that's going to
Hmm.
resonate and be cut up into a clip that they can just blast all over the internet. And that's all I
Right.
think it's for. And when I know that, like when I know that that's the only purpose of it, and not to have like what you and I are having here, which is a long form
Hmm.
discussion or even like even an intelligent debate back and forth, then I
Yeah.
know that like that's all it's for. So is it entertaining? Absolutely. But I understand that that's not lawmaking. That's not the
Yeah.
the grunt work of lawmaking. That's just the
Right.
theater and the fireworks. So
Yeah.
I take it with a grain of salt because I know that it's just for publicity.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes
Sadly.
sense.
I
Well,
mean, that's just
they
how I
get
see
my
it.
blood pressure up, so it's working.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and there's definitely a lot of sound bites out there, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, like I've been like looking all over the internet and it's just like, man, that was 4 hours of content that can just
Yeah.
get chopped up in any way, shape, or form. And it's interesting because, you know, depending on which side you fall on, there were points
Oh,
scored
yeah.
on either side. And so you got to think about it like that. All the Democrats that wanted to blast him, they've got their own sound bites that they're putting
Yeah.
together and their little clips. And then you've got the Republicans or the people that are supporting Trump or supporting Pete Hegseth, they've got their clips. So it's really
Hmm.
fascinating to like see like how the fireworks played out on either side. And then if depending
Yeah.
on where you go to the media, you get a completely different story of what happened.
Yeah. And that's the thing that drives me crazy is how easily manipulative everything can be. And although social media is fantastic, it's allowing us to do the podcast and stuff and getting our voices out. But uh, it just, I don't know, it's something that irks me that they can do that. And
I know.
they should be required. You got to play the full clip. Like, you know,
Right.
I don't know.
Well, nobody
Ethically,
would
I think
watch
it's
it.
messed up.
It is
Well, true,
ethically messed up, but
true.
nobody would watch it if you just play the soundbite. I am worried. Like to be honest with you, Andrew, when you look at like the fact that you can take a 30-second soundbite or you can use an AI bot
Yeah.
to generate a message. I mean, we're in a scary world. I tell people this all the time now. I'm like, we are in a scary, unprecedented world because the
Absolutely.
information domain is a contested battle space.
Yeah.
And I do believe that either side is jockeying for power.
Hmm.
And it's like I said, this was my first foray into any of this, and
Yeah.
I think I underestimated how powerful this is. Like I
Hmm.
think before coming into this week, I really didn't understand the the machine that this stuff is, and I will be
Yeah.
happy to get back to Mississippi and go back to my slow life and do my
Yeah.
podcasts and have very pleasant people on my show and talk about fun things
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
even though I enjoy it and I think it's important and I think that it's necessary for good people to stand up and speak out, I couldn't imagine this being like my life every day.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think I always say that there needs to be more veterans involved in politics. Uh,
100%.
and that there are organizations out there that try to push that and will help and things of that nature. But I think just like me, I think a lot of veterans don't want to get involved because it's like I don't want to get involved in stupidity. And
Hmm.
for me, I have a little bit of a temper, and I may I may say things that people don't like, and so I'd probably get myself in trouble.
Yeah, I
And
feel
I
the
think
same
there's a
way.
lot of people like that. It's just I don't know. But there has to be people,
Right.
veterans in there, and there are some good veterans out there, doing good things.
Right.
You know,
No, I agree. And I do believe that veterans belong in politics. And I do believe that we, having served in combat or served in combat zones, having the experience that we have, if we're called upon to serve, we should serve. I mean,
yeah.
this is black and white as I see it. So it is definitely an interesting time. And I think that I'm just grateful for people like Sean Ryan and Scott
Hmm.
Mann and other veterans that are so prominent like those two. I mean, those two come to mind immediately when I think of like veterans who are in the information environment that are doing something to step up and make a difference. Both of them. I mean,
Right.
Scott's got his play Last Man Out. He's got a new podcast now, The Scott Man Show, which is kind of like the
Yeah.
Sean Ryan show. And they've just done something that's so, I think, groundbreaking with their media channels. Scott Mann hosted a LinkedIn Live 3 weeks ago. I attended it. 300 people called in. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was like the week after the Cybertruck bombing.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
we were all sort of as veterans feeling a little bit like, whoa, because it was not just that. There was the New Orleans, and one guy was
Mm-hmm.
active duty, the other guy was a veteran. So I think Scott just felt like this was a time for people to come together. And Sean Ryan was also doing like a big live on X
Yeah.
to talk about his guest, Sam Shoemate, who had gone on a show. And that weekend, that was just, I would listen to both shows. And I definitely walked away from both of those shows going, holy crap, like this, we've got some things that we got to deal with, and we got to find good men and women to step up
Yeah.
and speak up and use the gifts that they have, like whatever those gifts are. My gift might be podcasting and speaking up and being able to
Yeah.
speak well on camera. Another person's gift might be the fact that they understand intel and they can go through and understand how to piece together just different pieces of information to make
Right.
decisions. I don't know, but I think we're going to need all of us patriots to stand up and to
Yeah.
make our country safe again.
That's true. I got a question like it. Looking at podcasting now, right? You have obviously very big name podcasters out there who are doing incredible interviews. Like, they did, President Trump, they did
Sure,
JD Vance, they all these incredibly big who typically would just go to the news stations.
they
So
would
now the
have.
news stations are kind of the outcasts and
I
the
know.
podcasts are coming into the mainstream. How do you think it, or how do you feel about all that?
I love it. I
Yeah.
mean, as a podcaster, I guess I'm shamelessly biased, but and I mean, I think that broadcast news would have had a place if they had not become so not so transparent. I mean, they just weren't transparent about their bias. That's the
Yeah.
problem. They pretend like they're unbiased. I mean,
Hmm.
I have opinions. I'm biased.
Yeah.
I tell people I have
Everybody does.
opinions and I'm biased. So my small teeny little audience, they know my opinions. I don't hide them. And I think
Hmm.
that's the problem with the mainstream media or the legacy media is that they try to pretend like they're fair and unbiased and they're not.
Yeah.
And
I would agree with that.
right, like all they have to
Hmm.
do, I mean, maybe they're reporting facts. I mean, I will say that, like maybe some of these outlets are reporting things that truly happened, but the slant and the
Hmm.
and the way that they're packaging it, the framing of the article
Right.
is completely biased depending on what you're reading it. I mean, you could
Hmm.
read the exact same event and then you go to the New York Times and then you go to
Yeah.
Newsmax and you get a completely different story
Yeah.
of what ended up happening. And so
Hmm.
that's where I think like the podcasters come in because as an audience member what your favorite podcaster's bias is.
Yeah.
You know that going into it. You know it. I mean, even Joe Rogan has a certain bias. I mean, and he's
Yeah.
huge. And so once you understand that, you know that you're dealing with a fair broker. Like you know what you're
Hmm.
getting. You're like,
Right.
okay, this person has an opinion. They're going to put their spin on it. Matt Walsh is going to be Matt Walsh. Candace Owens going to
Yeah.
be Candace Owen. You
That's your
you know,
statement. Yeah.
and you're like, okay, but I don't want to watch certain news outlets and just know that they're not being truthful with
Hmm.
what their bias is. And so I think that's the tough part. It doesn't mean that they should go away though. Like I do
Yeah.
believe that there is always and should always be a place for professionally put together media. Like
Yeah.
there should be these very, very high tech, high end media
Hmm.
outlets because they have the reach and they have the audience, but maybe they won't. I mean, maybe podcasters will take over. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah.
I would like to
What?
think not because good journalistic practices are not something I can do as a podcaster. Like I'm not going to a good
True.
journalist, yeah, will go and get like the archives and they'll dig. And I love to dig
Hmm.
too, but I still want to see good journalists, if that makes
Right.
sense.
No, absolutely. Because I mean, they're well trained in it, and
Right.
they know how to find the history of it. They know where to look and all that type of. I have no clue. I'll just
Oh
have somebody
gosh.
on and just say, "Hey, how you doing?"
Exactly, exactly.
You
Andrew,
know?
I'm just having conversations with people. I don't necessarily, and I think about this all the time too when I'm looking into a court case. I'm like, I don't know how to study case law and like
Yeah.
go to, especially with military issues. Like, I don't understand how to go to all these different like previous cases and how they've been decided or how to look into
Hmm.
some of these records requests and other things. And that's where we need our archivists and we need
Oh
our
yeah.
really good journalists to do that. I mean, I was reading or I was watching a oh, what was it about? It was, I don't know. I think it was a true crime
Mm.
case, and I can't even remember which one, but they were talking about how um, they had a journalist on there and the ways in which oh, she was looking at the families of that lawyer down in the South. You probably know his name, but he's the
Oh
one who killed his wife and
yeah.
he killed his
Yeah. Yeah.
son and gosh, I can't remember his name. He's from like South Carolina or somewhere like
Yeah.
along his lines. Anyway,
If I had
she
my
did.
iPad, I'd be looking it up right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah. No worries, don't worries. See, this is where like you look at somebody like Joe Rogan and he's got like Jamie over there and Jamie's like
Yeah. Yeah.
looking up
Yeah.
whenever
Yeah.
he does what I just did, Jamie will like look up what it is
And
and
he
in the
pulls
middle
it
of the
up, and
show.
it's like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
yeah.
I'd love to have that one day, but anyway. So he she goes into like how she was able to go and go to these archives in the city where this lawyer was from and she was able to see like in the 18 like late 1800s what his family lineage was and how this family has been involved in crime or nefarious things for years. And so by the time this youngest generation lawyer started doing some of these things, it was already like in his DNA and in his family lineage that these things were happening. And to be able to understand that history and to
Hmm.
have that kind of that ability, I think that does take schooling and training and
Yeah.
networking and being in those professional organizations. So I don't want to see good journalism go away.
Yeah. I would
Quite
agree
the
with that
opposite,
100%.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think podcasters serve a purpose, like us just having this conversation and getting
Hmm.
subjects out and talking through things. But then I do think that there's still that need for investigative journalism.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's a good point. So, now being active duty and having a podcast, I have questions about that because now in the Marine Corps, they're pretty strict on just about everything. So
Sure.
they will kind of freak out about stuff. Uh, so I couldn't imagine doing that from the Marine
It's
Corps side. So how is that for you?
well, I've had the show for 4 years. I've had
Hmm.
171 episodes. Not all my episodes are controversial. So,
Hmm.
and not all my posts on social media are controversial. I have had
Hmm.
controversial posts. I have had controversial guests. So I would say I have a constant communication and dialogue with the lawyers on at my work, with the lawyer,
Hmm.
with my chain of command. No chain of command. I've only had this is my third command with the podcast, and every
Okay.
chain of command knew when I checked in that I had a show.
Hmm.
It's just something I say. We don't give up our First Amendment rights just because we serve. And there
Hmm.
have been a long history of service members testifying in Congress in civilian clothes. There have
Yeah.
been service members who lobby for particular policy changes off duty, out of uniform, in their personal capacity. And all those people who do that, they say what they do, they say who they are. They just definitely make it clear that they're speaking in their off-duty personal capacity. There's ways to put
Right.
disclaimers. I have disclaimers on every single one of my social media channels that
Oh
clearly
wow.
states that. So there's not like if you go on my Instagram, you go on any of my
Yeah.
socials, my website, everything, I've got a disclaimer. I don't think the disclaimers are needed. I think it's kind of obvious when you see me in civilian clothes and you see me with a personal opinion. The other rule
Yeah.
that I have is whatever command I'm serving under, I
Uh-huh.
will never, ever take a stand on a policy that command is pushing.
Oh
So
yeah,
it
that makes
doesn't,
sense for
yeah,
sure.
right. But I think that, and this is my opinion, my as a citizen, if I have a opinion on a Navy policy that's not
Mm,
within the chain of command of the command that I'm presently serving, I do believe it's within my First Amendment rights to advocate on that policy. So
that makes sense.
yeah, so that's been my way of navigating this world I find myself in, and it's definitely getting harder and harder the more senior I get,
Yeah.
and the more that time goes by. So I'm looking forward to my retirement in March of 2026 because I
Yeah.
do believe that it's just going to keep coming up. Like
Hmm.
I've had people warn me or harass me over it a little bit, but it
Mm.
usually passes. It usually gets resolved and we move
Right.
on every time it's happened.
Hmm.
But it's stressful when it's happening. And so
Oh
I
yeah.
look forward to the day when I don't have to worry about it anymore because
Yeah.
I know I'm doing the right thing. Like I know that, at least in my mind anyway, I believe I'm paving the way for others to do the same.
Yeah.
And
I would agree. Yeah.
so I have to just keep doing it. I'm the first female person who spoke out publicly in support of the SecDef. And
Yeah.
that took, it's taken a lot of courage but it's the right thing to do. And
Hmm.
I knew it in my heart. I knew when everything was going on with him, I know people that know him. And so I just said, I'm going to take the risk. And people didn't understand it to this day. They still don't understand it. I'm still getting a little bit of harassment and crap online over it, but I stand by what I did, and I think it was the right decision.
Yeah. You got to stand by your guns. I like that. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. So how you got to be, right?
that's
What other
right.
way is there to
That's
be
right.
out there? You know?
I would agree. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. Now you do your podcast, like mine are kind of streamlined toward telling veteran stories. That is kind of the whole premise behind what I got going on. Uh, Now you have all kinds of different individuals on. You know,
I
what
do.
were some of your favorite podcasts that you've done?
Well, my all-time favorite show was probably Tim Parlatore.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, he's been the Trump lawyer, he's been Sean Ryan's lawyer. I think he's Pete Hegseth's lawyer, but it wasn't because of any of that. Like, I'm not a person that just chases fame or chases like prominent people. I
Yeah.
loved getting into the law with him and understanding due process and
Hmm.
his fight to just make sense of the world. I mean, I love that he can go on CNN and then he can also go on Fox News. He can talk to anybody. And he
Hmm.
even has related a story I think I saw somewhere about how he's had people stop him that were just totally left-leaning, whatever, liberal, progressive, and they're just like, I got it. Like I get what you're saying. And I just love that. Like to me, that's like, and so I just felt like his show was so interesting because very few people can do that. Very few
Yeah.
people understand how to look at things from so many different sides and not necessarily infuse their bias, but use the Constitution, use the Bill of Rights, use the things we were founded upon and use
Yeah.
that as the reference for what's considered ethically correct. And I
Yeah.
just really enjoyed that show. Another one is Crystal Romero. She endured a very, very bullying coworker, and
Mm.
this coworker was very connected in the National Guard and
Ooh.
escaped a lot of accountability. And Crystal tried to hold her accountable, and they wound up pushing her out of the service. And to this day, she's still
Wow.
fighting for a medical retirement years and years later. And her
Mm.
story is just it just tears you apart. And she just
Yeah.
still continues to fight for it and advocate on it. And I was the first show where she really told the whole story because there were
Right.
parts, and that was the hard part. There were parts of the story that she was ashamed about. And so she
Hmm.
wouldn't tell those parts because she didn't want
Right.
to, discredit her cause. But it didn't really give people or give her even the ability to move on from that issue. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
so, and that's what you'll find in a lot of these cases with whistleblowers is that they're not perfect. They don't do everything right. They might break a rule here and there, but I believe that she deserves justice, and I'm just hopeful that I did, in some small part, help get her story out there. And
Yeah.
we keep in touch to this day, and she updates me on her case. And I really do hope
Very
that
nice.
that she gets the justice she deserves. But I love all my guests in different ways. Like I've had comedians on, I've had
Yeah.
people that are in the coaching space. I've just had so many. I've had people that just love to do different types of social media and
Right.
like to just share stories online, like this guy, Charles Ham. He's just so charismatic and great storyteller. So I think that it's just such a cool blessing to have this show. I mean, it's like every time I
Yeah.
have a guest, I'm sure you feel the same way. It's like, wow, so somebody wants to spend an hour with me and tell me their story. That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Oh man. Sometimes no, I don't know. I have no training whatsoever in anything like this, right? So whenever I'm doing an interview or I'm talking to somebody, I find that some people are incredibly easy to interview or whatever. So like you know how to talk, you know how to do, you can almost just run it by yourself, right? Uh, I've had guys on and it is like, oh my God, it's like pulling teeth. I'm like, come on, man, you got to say something. Don't leave me out to
Yeah.
dry. I've had some of those. Now they turn out good in the end. It's just, man, trying to get to the meat of things is pretty difficult sometimes for me.
No, that's a great point. I've had that too. I mean, I've had a few guests on, I won't say who, that I walked away from the show and I was like, something was off. Like we just didn't connect and we
Oh yeah.
didn't really have like that chemistry. And that's really hard when that happens.
Hmm.
But you find a way to get through it. And usually, like you said, by towards the end, excuse me, you work it out to where you can still salvage what a good conversation. But yeah, definitely. Some
Yeah.
conversations don't go as good as others, for
It's true.
sure.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you just, I mean, I just kind of liken it to like, I mean, I hate to say it, but like, and I remind myself of this in the workplace too. It's like, just like, there's dogs at the dog park that they like see each other a certain way and then they just like find ways that they're just repelled. It's like their
Yeah,
their magnetic attraction is repels them and so you have that same thing with people. Not
that's true.
everybody you're going to have this just amazing connection with. I mean, I've worked for people that literally would look through me. Like I would say something and they would just, I could just tell I wasn't reaching them at all. They did
Yeah.
not like me. They were not a Teresa fan. And yeah, I was like, all right, this is somebody that does not care for me. Got it.
Nice.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
Been there. Been there.
yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
exactly. Exactly. So,
I had a gentleman on, retired sergeant major, and before the podcast, we were talking, and man, we were chatting it up, and then I started the podcast. I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And he's like, "Good." And I was like, "Oh no."
not
I
good.
asked
Not
another
good.
question. And I said, "Oh, I'm excited to have you on or whatever." He's like, "Yeah, me too." And I was like, "Oh man, this is gonna be tough." And then after that, I was able to get him to open up. And when he did, it was a 4 hour long podcast. I mean, I think it was 3 hour long podcast. Oh yeah, this dude. I mean,
Wow.
and it was fantastic, fantastic. And it's the by far the best podcast that I've had as far as like viewership. And I was like, oh my God, man. But it was pretty wild. And he told some good stories, but it just took a couple of seconds to get it going.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but in my mind, I was like, oh man, this might not be good at all. So I was like, I got to figure
Oh,
something
it's
out.
so funny. Yeah.
But no,
I
he did
mean,
a fantastic job.
yeah, I've had that too, where like at the beginning of the conversation, you're not really sure where you're going to go because the person's not
Yeah.
opening up very much. Or sometimes, like, I really love getting into like people's upbringing and their childhood, but then there's some
Hmm.
people, and a lot of times when people have had tough childhoods, it's made it who they are and they're
Oh
as
yeah.
successful as they are because of their tough childhood. And I want them to
Yeah.
go into a little deeper, but I can tell they're not ready or they just kind of gloss over it. And it's like,
Hmm.
in a live call, you're just not going to, even in an unlive call, you just don't want
Yeah.
to dig or pry. But sometimes I wish people would share more because it
Hmm.
really gets like to the meat of what drives somebody and why
Yeah.
they care about the things that they do or they went down the roads that they did. And so, yeah, this is why
It's
oh, go ahead.
it yeah, it's what makes them them, you know?
Yeah,
Like everything that we've done in life, struggles that we've had or the good times that we've had, it makes you who you are. And
correct.
and to me that's important, That's whenever I interview a guy and have them tell their story, I always start, where did you grow up? How was that? And then what drew you into the military? And I have them talk about that because that is important. It kind of sometimes, shows you how they're going to be in the military a little bit. or how they've changed once they got in the military. What changed in you that, made you better or worse,
Exactly. And it's really important that I think we take the time to get to know people's stories and understand how they operate. Because I think
Hmm.
that once we do that, we realize that they're more alike than we are different. And there's so
Oh,
much
yeah.
commonalities in our stories and things that people can relate to. And I try my
Yeah.
best when I'm doing an interview to see the similarities between myself and my guest. And there always are.
Right.
There's always so much that I can find that are
That's
similar
true.
experiences, or especially since most of my guests have served in the military.
Right.
There's just a lot of great, like the guy I had on last night, Brad Miller. He got out over the COVID vaccine. And it's just fascinating because it's certainly somebody that I think would have continued to serve and would
Yeah.
continue to have stepped up and did what he had to do, but he made a decision that like not very many people will make. And I relate so much to that because there aren't any other active duty public affairs officers with a podcast and doing the things that I'm doing. And so it
Yeah.
really like hit home for me when he started to talk about that. I was like, wow, we have a lot in common, you know?
I just had somebody on this past week that was the same way. They got out because of the COVID vaccine and all that stuff. And she kind of is almost like she was ashamed. Like, I don't tell people about my service and this and that. And
Oh,
when I reached
that's
out to her, I was
sad.
like, hey, you want to tell your story, whatever. And, she's like, no, I don't. I kind of had bad experiences. I don't know if my story would be good. And I was like, well, every story is important. And that's why I try
Absolutely.
to get across to people, whether you have a good experience or a bad experience. And she ended up coming on and she did a fantastic job, really, really great. And, there was several individuals that reached back out to her like, hey, like, I appreciate what you did, saying no to the vaccine. I mean, that's good.
That's so
Uh,
cool.
so in the long run, I think it helped her out, but it was very interesting to me. And we
Yeah.
got to see it, you know.
Yeah, we did. We did, sadly. I mean, I've gone down that COVID mandate rabbit hole, and it's one you don't want to. Once you go down, you're like, oh God, what did I get myself into? I mean, that one's a
Yeah.
that's a scary one. I mean, that
Yeah.
I'm still sort of reading about it and trying to get my arms around what really happened there. But yeah, I'm glad that she was able to share her story on your podcast and then
Yeah.
realize that the stand that she took was one that showed people who she was. And I said that during my show. I said the people that they got out or they kicked out of the military were probably some of the best leaders because they're the
Yeah.
people who uh, will stand up for their beliefs and will do the research online and will expose themselves to different information and won't just follow the herd. And don't
Right.
we want those people in the military? I mean,
Absolutely.
we want people that will obviously rally around a cause and will step up to fight when the fight is needed. But I want leaders who can decide for themselves if an order is lawful. And if an order is
Right.
not lawful, then I think that that deserves to be questioned. And we need to have mechanisms and fair processes in place
Hmm.
for people to get those issues resolved and adjudicated. So I admire all the ones. I mean, as I was listening to him last night, I was like, wow, I didn't step up. I took the shot because I wanted to
Yeah.
promote. I was still thinking I was going to be on the O6 path. And
Yeah.
I was at it. It was right around the time I started my podcast. And I thought, if I don't lobby to go overseas and serve at a combatant command somewhere, I will not progress to O6.
Right.
And that was really what it came down to. I didn't necessarily believe in the vaccine. My husband never got it, but
Yeah.
I felt like it was something I had to do in order to stay competitive. I didn't think I needed it.
Hmm.
My husband and I would make jokes. He actually took a, oh gosh, what is it? It's the rum that he likes. Jim, or forget. Anyway, he has a he would just make jokes of it. I mean, it's really terrible, but he would put these like fake masks and yeah, like there's this kind of rum that he loves. If you said the name again, I need a Jamie, but he would actually put the plastic on it, and then we would have jokes where I would put like full masks on and we would take pictures of
Oh,
ourselves
nice.
just because we
Yeah.
thought it
Yeah.
was so stupid and we didn't understand it. And but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, my family they didn't take the shot. Now I took the first round of vaccines, and then shortly after that, because I waited as long as I could
Hmm.
uh, until they're like, "You got to do this," and I was like, "Okay,
Right.
fine, I'll go do it." But I was able to retire, and they had changed it and stuff, so it worked out. And I only got one dose of it. But I'll
Nice.
be honest, it's just like the flu shot for me. It doesn't matter. You get a vaccine shot, I still get sick. Every year I get the flu, whether I
I
get a
know.
shot or
I
I
know.
don't.
I know. I mean,
So
that's a large, Brad kind of alluded to that last night. That's a larger conversation about whether or not any of these vaccines are needed. And then what is the history of
yeah,
these vaccines? My husband has never had a vaccine. So and
yeah,
he's one of the healthiest people I know. So, I mean, that's just one anecdotal story, of course. I'm not trying to say anti-vax for everything. I'm just saying
yeah,
I definitely, like you, question those things just as much
yeah,
as I hear others do. So
yeah.
he definitely has opened my eyes to a lot of these things, and I'm very grateful for him in my life. But yeah, it's great to have these opportunities and to have these kinds of conversations because they're really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
people need to know that there's somebody else out there that's thinking the same way they are, you
I
know?
agree. I agree. They need to know that they're not alone. I think that's also part of
Oh, yeah.
why a lot of these issues tend to percolate and get worse than they really ought to be is because people think that they're all alone and they're not able to really share their story, or they don't feel that
Mm,
anybody feels the same way. And
yeah.
when you're able to get your story off your chest and get positive feedback and know that like your story helps somebody else, it's so therapeutic. It allows you
Absolutely.
to like process what happened and move forward. So it's great.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I thank you for coming on and doing this. I truly appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's been fun. I don't know. I've had a good time.
I've had a great
So,
time. Thanks, Andrew. No, you were
yeah.
wonderful to talk with. And like this is just a great cap to the rest of my day. In about an hour and a half, I'll be going to I think it's called Disabled American Veterans, DAV. I'm going to a
Yeah.
dinner tonight with a friend of mine. So yeah, I got to get ready here in a little bit. But yeah, no, this was great, Andrew. And if you need anything in the future, please let me know. I can't wait for the show to come out. I'll definitely promote it across my platforms as well.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I like it. I always give everyone an opportunity at the end to give words of wisdom. And I want to afford you the opportunity to do that as well.
I would say give everyone a chance to be seen, heard, and understood.
Mm,
When you do that, it's just so powerful. It's so powerful when somebody gets you. Like
yeah.
earlier this week, Robert Sweetman, one of the SEAL guys, he's like, "Yeah, you really get into your shows, don't you? You like go dive deep into these topics." And I'm like, "Yeah, I tend to be." And it was just nice. It was like, "Yeah, you get what I'm doing." And I was like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still that little girl that loves going to the library and picking up a book or researching things." So, yeah, no,
Right.
it's great.
Very nice. Awesome. Well, don't hang up on me, but I'm
Okay.
going to do my outro here.
Okay. Gotcha.
To all the listeners out there, if you're struggling, you need help, anything like that, don't forget the VA has some great resources. You can always dial 988, press option 1. You can text 838-255, or you can go to veteranscrisisline.net and click on the chat icon. Any of those options will put you in contact with somebody that can help you out. But remember, one veteran life loss is one too many. I care about you. I know Theresa cares about you.
Mhm.
The whole veteran community cares about you. So please reach out for help. And if you're out there and you're doing well, then reach out to the buddies that you serve with and ask them how they're doing. And if they need that helping hand, please give it to them. All right, Theresa, one last time, thank you. I appreciate it. To all the listeners out there, stay motivated. Change
Ton
your
Tavern,
socks.
birthplace of the Corps. We as Marines hold this history close to our hearts. Wouldn't it be spectacular if the establishment was born again? The Ton Legacy Foundation, a nonprofit 501c3, is taking the task and is looking to the Marines to once again save the day. Help the Lost Art podcast in raising funds to help get the Ton built once again only 100 yards from the original establishment in Philadelphia. We are looking for Marines to donate $25 representing the upcoming 250th birthday of the Corps. Spread the message and help establish the Ton, a place for Marine brethren to gather and remember our historic beginning. Go to the Lost Art GoFundMe page and donate today. The Ton Legacy Foundation, reestablishing our birthplace.